Section 34 of The Man from Snowy River and Other Verses by Andrew Barton Paterson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Arrowhead Aussie. Johnson's Antidote. Down along the Snakebite River where the overlanders camp, where the serpents are in millions, all of the most deadly stamp, where the station cook in terror nearly every time he bakes mixes up among the doughboys half a dozen poison snakes, where the wily free selector walks in armour-plated pants and defies the stings of scorpions and the bites of bulldog ants, where the adder and the viper tear each other by the throat, there it was that William Johnson sought his snakebite antidote. Johnson was a free selector, and his brain went rather queer, for the constant sight of serpents filled him with a deadly fear. So he tramped his free selection morning, afternoon, and night, seeking for some great specific that would cure the serpent's bite, till King Billy of the Mookie, chieftain of the Flourbag Head, told him, "S'posen snake bite fella mostly drop down dead. S'posen snake bite old goanna, then you watch a while you see. Old goanna cure himself with eatin' little fella tree." "That's the cure," said William Johnson. "Point me out this plant sublime." But King Billy, feeling lazy, said he'd go another time. Thus it came to pass that Johnson, having got the tale by rote, followed every stray goanna, seeking for the antidote. Loafing once beside the river, while he thought his heart would break, there he saw a big goanna fighting with a tiger snake. In and out they rolled and wriggled, bit each other heart and soul, till the valiant old goanna swallowed his opponent whole. Breathless, Johnson sat and watched him, saw him struggle up the bank, saw him nibbling at the branches of some bushes green and rank, saw him happy and contented lick his lips as off he crept, while the bulging in his stomach showed where his opponent slept. Then a cheer of exultation burst aloud from Johnson's throat. "Luck at last," said he. "I've struck it. 'Tis the famous antidote. Here it is, the grand elixir, greatest blessing ever known. 20,000 men in India die each year of snakes alone. Think of all the foreign nations, Negro, Chow, and Blackamoor, saved from sudden expiration by my wondrous snakebite cure. It will bring me fame and fortune in the happy days to be. Men of every clime and nation will be round to gaze on me. Scientific men in thousands, men of mark and men of note, rushing down the Mookie River after Johnson's antidote. It will cure delirium tremens when the patient's eyeballs stare at imaginary spiders, snakes which really are not there. When he thinks he sees them wriggle, when he thinks he sees them bloat, it will cure him just to think of Johnson's snakebite antidote." Then he rushed to the museum, found a scientific man. "Trot me out a deadly serpent, just the deadliest you can. I intend to let him bite me, all the risk I will endure, just to prove the sterling value of my wondrous snakebite cure. Even though an adder bit me, back to life again I'd float. Snakes are out of date, I tell you, since I've found the antidote." Said the scientific person, "If you really want to die, go ahead, but if you're doubtful, let your sheepdog have a try. Get a pair of dogs and try it, let the snake give both a nip. Give your dog the snakebite mixture, let the other fellow rip. If he dies and yours survives him, then it proves the thing is good. Will you fetch your dog and try it?" Johnson rather thought he would. So he went and fetched his canine, hauled him forward by the throat. "Stump, old man," says he, "we'll show them we've the genuine antidote." Both the dogs were duly loaded with the poison gland's contents. Johnson gave his dog the mixture, then sat down to wait events. "Mark," he said, "in 20 minutes Stump'll be a rushin' round, while the other wretched creature lies a corpse upon the ground." But alas for William Johnson! Ere they watched a half-hour's spell, Stumpy was as dead as mutton. The other dog was live and well, and the scientific person hurried off with utmost speed, tested Johnson's drug, and found it was a deadly poison weed. Half a tumbler killed an emu, half a spoonful killed a goat. All the snakes on earth were harmless to that awful antidote. Down along the Mookie River, on the overlanders' camp, where the serpents are in millions, all of the most deadly stamp, Wanders daily William Johnson down among those poisonous hordes, shooting every stray goanna, calls them black and yaller frauds. And King Billy of the Mookie, cadging for the cast-off coat, somehow seems to dodge the subject of the snakebite antidote. End of Section 34. Section 35 of The Man from Snowy River and Other Verses by Andrew Barton Paterson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Arrowhead Aussie. Ambition and Art. Ambition. I am the maid of the lustrous eyes of great fruition, whom the sons of men that are overwise have called ambition. And the world's success is the only goal I have within me. The meanest man with the smallest soul may woo and win me. For the lust of power and the pride of place to all I proffer. Wilt thou take thy part in the crowded race for what I offer? The choice is thine, and the world is wide. Thy path is lonely. I may not lead, and I may not guide. I urge thee only. I am just a whip and a spur that smites to fierce endeavour. In the restless days and the sleepless nights I urge thee ever. Thou shalt wake from sleep with a startled cry, in fright upleaping at a rival's step as it passes by, whilst thou art sleeping. Honour and truth shall be overthrown in fierce desire. Thou shalt use thy friend as a stepping-stone to mount thee higher. When the curtain falls on the sordid strife that seems so splendid, thou shalt look with pain on the wasted life that thou hast ended. Thou hast sold thy life for a guerdon small in fitful flashes. There has been reward, but the end of all is dust and ashes. For the night has come, and it brings to naught thy projects cherished, and thine epitaph shall in brass be wrought. He lived and perished. Art. I wait for thee at the outer gate, my love, mine only. Wherefore tarriest thou so late, while I am lonely? Thou shalt seek my side with a footstep swift. In thee implanted is the love of art, and the greatest gift that God has granted. And the world's concerns with its rights and wrongs shall seem but small things. Poet or painter, a singer of songs, thine art is all things. For the wine of life is a woman's love to keep beside thee, but the love of art is a thing above, a star to guide thee. As the years go by with thy love of art all undiminished, thou shalt end thy days with a quiet heart. Thy work is finished. So the painter fashions a picture strong that fadeth never, and the singer singeth a wondrous song that lives forever. End of Section 35. Section 36 of The Man from Snowy River and Other Verses by Andrew Barton Paterson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Arrowhead Aussie. The daylight is dying. The daylight is dying away in the west. The wild birds are flying in silence to rest. In leafage and frondage, where shadows are deep, they pass to its bondage, the kingdom of sleep. And watched in their sleeping by stars in the height, they rest in your keeping, O wonderful night. When night doth her glories of starshine unfold, 'tis then that the stories of bushland are told. Unnumbered I hold them in memories bright, but who could unfold them or read them aright? Beyond all denials the stars in their glories, the breeze in the miles, are part of these stories. The waving of grasses, the song of the river that sings as it passes for ever and ever. The hobble chains rattle, the calling of birds, the lowing of cattle must blend with the words. Without these, indeed, you would find it ere long as though I should read you the words of a song, that lamely would linger when lacking the rune, the voice of the singer, the lilt of the tune. But as one half hearing an old-time refrain, with memory clearing, recalls it again. These tales roughly wrought of the bush and its ways may call back a thought of the wandering days, and blending with each, in the memories that throng, there happily shall reach you some echo of song. End of Section 36. Section 37 of The Man from Snowy River and Other Verses by Andrew Barton Paterson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Arrowhead Aussie. In Defence of the Bush. So you're back from up the country, Mr. Townsman, where you went, and you're cursing all the business in a bitter discontent. Well, we grieve to disappoint you, and it makes us sad to hear that it wasn't cool and shady, and there wasn't plenty beer, and the loony bullock snorted when you first came into view. Well, you know it's not so often that he sees a swell like you. And the roads were hot and dusty, and the plains were burnt and brown, and no doubt you're better suited drinking lemon squash in town. Yet perchance if you should journey down the very track you went, in a month or two at furthest, you would wonder what it meant. Where the sun-baked earth was gasping like a creature in its pain, you would find the grasses waving like a field of summer grain, and the miles of thirsty gutters, blocked with sand and choked with mud, you would find them mighty rivers with a turbid sweeping flood. For the rain and drought and sunshine make no changes in the street, in the sullen line of buildings, and the ceaseless tramp of feet. But the bush hath moods and changes as the seasons rise and fall, and the men who know the bushland, they are loyal through it all. But you found the bush was dismal and a land of no delight. Did you chance to hear a chorus in the shearers' huts at night? Did they rise up William Riley by the campfire's cheery blaze? Did they rise him as we rose him in the good old droving days? And the women of the homesteads and the men you chanced to meet, were their faces sour and saddened, like the faces in the street? And the shy selector children, were they better now or worse than the little city urchins who would greet you with a curse? Is not such a life much better than the squalid street and square, where the fallen women flaunt it in the fierce electric glare, where the sempstress plies her sewing till her eyes are sore and red, in a filthy, dirty attic toiling on for daily bread? Did you hear no sweeter voices in the music of the bush than the roar of trams and buses and the war-whoop of the push? Did the magpies rouse your slumbers with their carol, sweet and strange? Did you hear the silver chiming of the bellbirds on the range? But perchance the wild bird's music by your senses was despised, for you say you'll stay in townships till the bush is civilised. Would you make it a tea garden, and on Sundays have a band, where the blokes might take their donors, with a public close at hand? You had better stick to Sydney and make merry with the push, for the bush will never suit you, and you'll never suit the bush. End of Section 37. Section 38 of The Man from Snowy River and Other Verses by Andrew Barton Paterson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Arrowhead Aussie. Last week. Oh, the new chum went to the Black Block Run, but he should have gone there last week. He tramped 10 miles with a loaded gun, but of turkey or duck he saw never a one, for he should have been there last week, they said. There were flocks of 'em there last week. He wended his way to a waterfall, and he should have gone there last week. He carried a camera, legs and all, but the day was hot and the stream was small, for he should have gone there last week, they said. They drowned a man there last week. He went for a drive and he made a start, which should have been made last week, for the old horse died of a broken heart, so he footed it home and he dragged the cart. But the horse was all right last week, they said. He trotted a match last week. So he asked the bushes who came from far to visit the town last week if they'd dine with him, and they said hurrah, but there wasn't a drop in the whiskey jar. You should have been here last week, he said. I drank it all up last week. End of Section 38. Section 39 of The Man from Snowy River and Other Verses by Andrew Barton Paterson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Arrowhead Aussie. Those Names. The shearers sat in the firelight, hearty and hale and strong, after the hard day's shearing, passing the joke along. The ringer that shore 100, as they never were shorn before, and the novice who, toiling bravely, had tommyhawked half a score. The tarboy, the cook, and the slushy, the sweeper that swept the board, the picker-up and the penner, with the rest of the shearing horde. There were men from the inland stations, where the skies like a furnace glow, and men from the snowy river, the land of the frozen snow. There were swarthy Queensland drovers, who reckoned all land by miles, and farmers' sons from the Murray, where many a vineyard smiles. They started at telling stories, when they wearied of cards and games, and to give these stories a flavour, they threw in some local names. And a man from the bleak Monaro, away on the table land, he fixed his eyes on the ceiling, and he started to play his hand. He told them of Adjun Toothbong, where the pine-clad mountains freeze, and the weight of the snow in summer breaks branches off the trees. And as he warmed to the business, he let them have it strong. Nimity Bell, Conago, Weir, Bongongalong. He lingered over them fondly, because they recalled to mind a thought of the old bush homestead, and the girl that he left behind. Then the shearers all sat silent, till a man in the corner rose. Said he, "I've travelled a plenty, but never heard names like those. Out in the western districts, out on the Castlereagh, most of the names are easy, short for a man to say. You've heard of Mungry Bambone, and the Gunda Bluey Pine, Quabotha, Girralambone, and Terramunga Mine, Quembone, Yanoni, Harinya, Weir, and Bunty Joe." But the rest of the shearers stopped him. "For the sake of your jaw, go slow. If you reckon those names are short ones out where such names prevail, just try and remember some long ones before you begin the tale." And the man from the western district, though never a word he said, just winked with his dexter eyelid, and then he retired to bed. End of Section 39. Section 40 of The Man from Snowy River and Other Verses by Andrew Barton Paterson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Arrowhead Aussie. A Bush Christening. On the outer Barcoo, where the churches are few, and men of religion are scanty, on a road never crossed except by folk that are lost, one Michael Magee had a shanty. Now this Mike was the dad of a 10-year-old lad, plump, healthy, and stoutly conditioned. He was strong as the best, but poor Mike had no rest, for the youngster had never been christened. And his wife used to cry, if the darlin' should die, St. Peter would not recognise him. But by luck he survived, till a preacher arrived, who agreed straight away to baptise him. Now the artful young rogue, while they held their collogue, with his ear to the keyhole was listening, and he muttered in fright, while his features turned white, "What the divil and all is this christening?" He was none of your dolts, he had seen them brand colts, and it seemed to his small understanding, if the man in the frock made him one of the flock, it must mean something very like branding. So away with a rush he set off for the bush, while the tears in his eyelids they glistened. "'Tis outrageous," says he, "to brand youngsters like me. I'll be dashed if I'll stop to be christened." Like a young native dog he ran into a log, and his father, with language uncivil, never heeding the praist, cried out in his haste, "Come out and be christened, you devil!" But he lay there as snug as a bug in a rug, and his parents in vain might reprove him, till his reverence spoke. He was fond of a joke. "I've a notion," says he, "that'll move him. Poke a stick up the log, give the spalpeen a prog, poke him aisy, don't hurt him or maim him. 'Tis not long that he'll stand. I've the water at hand. As he rushes out this end I'll name him. Here he comes, then for shame, you've forgotten the name. Is it Patsy or Michael or Dennis?" Here the youngster ran out, and the priest gave a shout, "Take your chance anyhow wit McGinnis." As the howling young cub ran away to the scrub, where he knew that pursuit would be risky, the priest, as he fled, flung a flask at his head that was labelled McGinnis's Whiskey. And McGinnis Magee has been made a J.P., and the one thing he hates more than sin is to be asked by the folk who have heard of the joke how he came to be christened McGinnis. End of Section 40. Section 41 of The Man from Snowy River and Other Verses by Andrew Barton Paterson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Arrowhead Aussie. How the Favourite Beat Us. "Aye," said the boozer, "I tell you it's true, sir. I once was a punter with plenty of pelf, but gone is my glory. I'll tell you the story, how I stiffened my horse and got stiffened myself. 'Twas a mare called the Cracker. I came down to back her, but found she was favourite all of a rush. The folk just did pour on to lay 6-4 on, and several bookies were killed in the crush. It seems old Tomato was stiff though a starter. They reckoned him fit for the Caulfield to keep. The bloke and the donor were scratched by their owner. He only was offered 3/4 of the sweep. We knew Salamander was slow as a gander. The mare could have beat him the length of the straight, and old Manumission was out of condition, and most of the others were running off weight. No doubt someone blew it, for everyone knew it. The bets were all gone, and I muttered in spite, 'If I can't get a copper, by jingo I'll stop her. Let the public fall in, it will serve the brutes right.' I said to the jockey, 'Now listen, my cocky, you watch as you're cantering down by the stand. I'll wait where that toff is, and give you the office. You're only to win if I lift up my hand.' I then tried to back her. 'What price is the Cracker?' 'Our books are all full, sir,' each bookie did swear. My mind then I made up, my fortune I played up. I bet every shilling against my own mare. I strolled to the gateway. The mare in the straightway was shifting and dancing and pawing the ground. The boy saw me enter, and wheeled for his canter, when a darned great mosquito came buzzing around. They breed 'em at Exham. It's risky to vex 'em. They suck a man dry at a sitting, no doubt. But just as the mare passed, he fluttered my hair past. I lifted my hand and I flattened him out. I was stunned when they started. The mare simply darted away to the front when the flag was let fall, for none there could match her, and none tried to catch her. She finished a furlong in front of them all. You bet that I went for the boy whom I sent for, the moment he weighed and came out of the stand. 'Who paid you to win it? Come own up this minute.' 'Lord love you,' said he, 'why you lifted your hand.' 'Twas true by St. Peter, that cursed mosquito had broke me so broke that I hadn't a brown. And you'll find the best course is, when dealing with horses, to win when you're able, and keep your hands down." End of Section 41. Section 42 of The Man from Snowy River and Other Verses by Andrew Barton Paterson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Arrowhead Aussie. The Great Calamity. Macpherson came to Whiskyhurst when summer days were hot, and bided there with Jock McThirst, a brawny brother Scot. Good faith they made the whisky fly, like Highland chieftains true, and when they'd drunk the beaker dry, they sang, "We are nae fou." There is nae folk like our ain folks, sae gallant and sae true. They sang the only Scottish joke, which is, "We are nae fou." Said bold McThirst, "Let Saxons jaw aboot their great concerns, but bonny Scotland beats them a', the land of cake and burns. The land of partridge, deer and grouse, fill up your glass I beg. There's muckle whisky in the house, forby what's in the keg." And here a hearty laugh he laughed, "Just come with me I beg. Macpherson oon saw with pleasure daft a 50-gallon keg." "Losh, man, that's grand," Macpherson cried, "so're ever man the like. Now with the daylight I maun ride to meet a southern tyke. But I'll be back ere summer's gone, so bide for me I beg. We'll make a grand assault upon yon divil of a keg." Macpherson rode to Whiskyhurst when summer days were gone, and there he met with Jock McThirst, was greeting all alone. "McThirst, what gars ye look sae blank? Have all your wits gone daft? Has that accursed southern bank called up your overdraft? Is all your grass burnt up with drought? Is wool and hides gone flat?" McThirst replied, "Good friend, in truth, 'tis muckle waur than that. Has sair misfortune cursed your life, that you should weep sae free? Is harm upon your bonny wife, the children at your knee? Is skaith upon your house and home?" McThirst upraised his head. "My bairns hae done the deed of shame, 'twere better they were dead. To think my bonny infant son should do the deed of guilt. He let the whisky spigot run, and a' the whisky's spilt. Upon them both these words did bring a solemn silence deep. Good faith, it is a fearsome thing to see two strong men weep. End of section 42. Section 43 of The Man from Snowy River and Other Verses by Andrew Barton Paterson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Arrowhead Aussie. Come by Chance. As I pondered very weary o'er a volume long and dreary, for the plot was void of interest, 'twas the postal guide in fact, there I learnt the true location, distance, size, and population of each township, town, and village in the radius of the Act. And I learnt that Puckawidgee stands beside the Murrumbidgee, and that Booleroy and Bumble get their letters twice a year. Also that the Post Inspector, when he visited Collector, closed the office up in Stanta and reopened Dungalia. But my languid mood forsook me when I found a name that took me. Quite by chance I came across it. Come by chance was what I read. No location was assigned it, not a thing to help one find it, just an N which stood for northward, and the rest was all unsaid. I shall leave my home and forthward wander stoutly to the northward, till I come by chance across it, and I'll straightway settle down, for there can't be any hurry, nor the slightest cause for worry, where the telegraph don't reach you, nor the railways run to town. And one's letters and exchanges come by chance across the ranges, where a wiry young Australian leads a pack-horse once a week, and the good news grows by keeping, and you're spared the pain of weeping over bad news when the mailman drops the letters in the creek. But I fear, and more's the pity, that there's really no such city, for there's not a man can find it, of the shrewdest folk I know. Come by chance, be sure it never means a land of fierce endeavour. It is just the careless country where the dreamers only go. Though we work and toil and hustle in our life of haste and bustle, all that makes our life worth living comes unstriven for and free. Man may weary and importune, but the fickle goddess Fortune deals him out his pain or pleasure, careless what his worth may be. All the happy times entrancing, days of sport and nights of dancing, moonlit rides and stolen kisses, pouting lips and loving glance, when you think of these be certain you have looked behind the curtain, you have had the luck to linger just a while in Come by Chance. End of section 43. Section 44 of The Man from Snowy River and Other Verses by Andrew Barton Paterson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Arrowhead Aussie. Under the Shadow of Kiley's Hill. This is the place where they all were bred. Some of the rafters are standing still. Now they are scattered and lost and dead. Everyone from the old nest fled, out of the shadow of Kiley's Hill. Better it is that they ne'er came back. Changes and chances are quickly rung. Now the old homestead is gone to wrack. Green is the grass on the well-worn track, down by the gate where the roses clung. Gone is the garden they kept with care, left to decay at its own sweet will. Fruit trees and flower beds eaten bare, cattle and sheep where the roses were, under the shadow of Kiley's Hill. Where are the children that throve and grew in the old homestead in days gone by? One is away on the far Barcoo, watching his cattle the long year through, watching them starve in the droughts and die. One in the town where all cares are rife, weary with troubles that cramp and kill, fain would be done with the restless strife, fain would go back to the old bush life, back to the shadow of Kiley's Hill. One is away on the roving quest, seeking his share of the golden spoil, out in the waste of the trackless west, wondering ever he gives the best of his years and strength to the hopeless toil. What of the parents? That unkept mound shows where they slumber united still. Rough is their grave, but they sleep as sound out on the range as on holy ground, under the shadow of Kiley's Hill. End of section 44. Section 45 of The Man from Snowy River and Other Verses by Andrew Barton Paterson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Arrowhead Aussie. Jim Carew. Born of a thoroughbred English race, well proportioned and closely knit, neat of figure and handsome face, always ready and always fit, hard and wiry of limb and through, that was the ne'er-do-well, Jim Carew. One of the sons of the good old land, many a year since his like was known, never a game but he took command, never a sport but he held his own, gained at his college a triple blue, good as they make them, was Jim Carew. Came to grief, was it card or horse? Nobody asked and nobody cared, ship him away to the bush of course, ne'er-do-well fellows are easily spared, only of women a tolerable few sorrowed at parting with Jim Carew. Gentleman Jim on the cattle camp, sitting his horse with an easy grace, but the reckless living has left its stamp in the deep-drawn lines of that handsome face, and a harder look in those eyes of blue, prompted a quarrel, is Jim Carew. Billy the Lasher was out for gore, 12-stone navvy with chest of hair, when he opened out with a hungry roar. On a 10-stone man it was hardly fair, but his wife was wise if his face she knew, by the time you were done with him, Jim Carew. Gentleman Jim in the stockman's hut, works with them, toils with them, side by side, as to his past, well his lips are shut. Gentleman once, says his mates with pride, and the wildest cornstalk can ne'er outdo, in feats of recklessness, Jim Carew. What should he live for? A dull despair, drink as his master and drags him down, water of Lethe that drowns all care. Gentleman Jim has a lot to drown, and he reigns as king with a drunken crew, sinking to misery, Jim Carew. Such is the end of the ne'er-do-well, Jimmy the boozer, all down at heel, but he straightens up when he's asked to tell his name and race, and a flash of steel still lightens up in those eyes of blue. I am, or no, I was, Jim Carew. End of section 45. Section 46 of The Man from Snowy River and Other Verses by Andrew Barton Paterson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Arrowhead Aussie. The Swagman's Rest. We buried old Bob where the bloodwoods wave, at the foot of the Eagle Hawk. We fashioned a cross on the old man's grave, for fear that his ghost might walk. We carved his name on a bloodwood tree, with the date of his sad decease, and in place of died from effects of spree, we wrote, May he rest in peace. For Bob was known on the overland, a regular old bush wag, tramping along in the dust and sand, humping his well-worn swag. He would camp for days in the river bed and loiter and fish for whales. I'm into the swagman's yard, he said, and I never shall find the rails. But he found the rails on that summer night, for a better place, or worse, as we watched by turn in the flickering light, with an old black gin for nurse. The breeze came in with a scent of pine, the river sounded clear, when a change came on and we saw the sign that told us the end was near. But he spoke in a cultured voice and low, I fancy they've sent the route. I once was an army man, you know, though now I'm a drunken brute. But bury me out where the bloodwoods wave, and if ever you're fairly stuck, just take and shovel me out of the grave, and maybe I'll bring you luck. For I've always heard—" here his voice fell weak, his strength was well nigh sped. He gasped and struggled and tried to speak, then in a moment dead. Thus ended a wasted life and hard of energies misapplied. Old Bob was out of the swagman's yard, and over the great divide. The drought came down on the field and flock, and never a raindrop fell, though the tortured moans of the starving stock might soften a fiend from hell. And we thought of the hint that the swagman gave when he went to his great unseen. We shovelled the skeleton out of the grave to see what his hint might mean. We dug where the cross and the graveposts were, we shovelled away the mould, when all of a sudden a vein of quartz lay bare, all gleaming with yellow gold. 'Twas a reef with never a fault nor baulk, that ran from the range's crest, and the richest mine on the Eagle Hawk is known as the Swagman's Rest. The End. End of Section 46. Section 47 of The Man from Snowy River and Other Verses by Andrew Barton Paterson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Arrowhead Aussie. From the section of advertisements at the end of the 1911 printing. The Man from Snowy River and Other Verses by A. B. Paterson. The Literary Yearbook. The immediate success of this book of bush ballads is without parallel in colonial literary annals, nor can any living English or American poet boast so wide a public, always excepting Mr. Rudyard Kipling. Spectator. These lines have the true lyrical cry in them, eloquent and ardent verses. Athenaeum. Swinging, rattling ballads of ready humour, ready pathos, and crowding adventure, stirring and entertaining ballads about great rides in which the lines gallop like the very hoofs of the horses. The Times. At his best he compares not unfavourably with the author of Barrack Room Ballads. Mr. A. Patchett Martin, in Literature, London. In my opinion, it is the absolutely un-English, thoroughly Australian style and character of these new bush bards which has given them such immediate popularity, such wide vogue among all classes of the rising native generation. Westminster Gazette. Australia has produced in Mr. A. B. Paterson a national poet whose bush ballads are as distinctly characteristic of the country as Burns' poetry is characteristic of Scotland. The Scotsman. A book like this is worth a dozen of the aspiring idealistic sort, since it has a deal of rough laughter and a dash of real tears in its composition. Glasgow Herald. These ballads are full of such go that the mere reading of them makes the blood tingle. But there are other things in Mr. Paterson's book besides mere racing and chasing, and each piece bears the mark of special local knowledge, feeling and colour. The poet has also a note of pathos which is always wholesome. Literary World. He gallops along with a by no means doubtful music, shouting his vigorous songs as he rides in pursuit of wild bush horses, constraining us to listen and applaud by dint of his manly tones and capital subjects. We turn to Mr. Paterson's roaring muse with instantaneous gratitude. End of Section 47. End of The Man from Snowy River and Other Verses by Andrew Barton Paterson.